Welcome to Sales Connect. I'm really excited to spend time with you here to share my vision of social selling and where it's going in the future. And I first want to thank you. Thank you for those who are here in Vegas. We appreciate you coming out. Many of you are sales and marketing leaders who do a lot of travel, and for many of you, it's your Q4. So thank you for taking the time and investing to spend it here. And as I look around, looks like we have a few of you had some late nights, but encourage you to bring it home. We're going to do it. And I also want to thank everyone on the live stream. Let's give it up for all the folks joining us for the live stream. Thank you. Great. And I want to do more than thank you. I also want to congratulate you. I want to congratulate you for seeing the writing on the wall, for seeing an opportunity of social selling and what this can do for your firms. And you acted on it and you came here. And don't take it for granted. A lot of smart people in history have missed the boat, have missed some important trends. Take, for example, if we go back, 1859, Charles Darwin wrote The Origin of the Species. Completely changed the game with natural science, natural history, obviously introduced evolution, natural selection. Pretty big breakthrough, right? Perhaps the biggest book or the biggest thing that happened in the 20th century for who? For the natural sciences, for the Linnean Society. And here we see someone here who unfortunately missed the boat. So this is an unfortunate one. But I'll share another one of a more recent time. And here we have, of course, the introduction of the iPhone. How many of you here have iPhones? Quite a few. Great. A lot of you have smartphones, Android devices. Huge trend, obviously. Changed the world. And yet some bright people missed this one. So this is a quote from 2006, the year before the iPhone came out. And this is one of those you wish you probably you could take your quote back. So, but this happens to all of us. We sometimes miss the boat. The last one I'll share is, it's around this number, $260 billion. Does anyone know what $260 billion represents here? Well, it's a market cap of a company we all know quite well. And that company is Facebook. So we all know what a success story Facebook is. But someone actually said this: Zuckerberg is an idiot. I can't believe he turned down Yahoo for $1 billion. And that person who said that's actually in the room today. Well, that idiot is me. So we've all here missed our trends. But the great thing is, we're not missing this one. That's why we're here, and we're here because we want to understand how to take advantage of social selling and get competitive advantage. And if we're going to talk about competitive advantage, we should start and go to the well. And the well, the source of a lot of modern strategy and competitive advantage, is going to be around Michael Porter. But before I get to Michael Porter, I want to talk about you are here because, again, you want to understand how to do this and how to take advantage of competitive advantage. And so, again, we're going to start here with Michael Porter, who wrote the seminal books on this topic in the early 80s. And his books really come down to a couple key concepts. One of them is this notion of sustainable competitive advantage. And that word sustainable is really important. This is in an era, came out early 80s, where it was, if you have something defensible, something differentiated, hunker down, and you build your whole company around your advantage. So if you're a low-cost provider, it's all about scale. If you have physical footprint, it's all about mining that. And your DNA, your culture, everything is about staying static and building that out. And it makes a lot of sense, because if you have something very valuable, what do you want to do? You want to put it in a vault and protect it. Makes a lot of sense. The problem is the world's changed. So much innovation and the speed of innovation is changing so quickly that that's no longer necessarily the best place to be. Because if the world's moving and you're static, what happens? And so we can go through example after example. And Mark Andreessen wrote about software's eating the world as just one example of how these changes are going on. And so this is represented by the castle, right? You're going to defend what is yours. But again, with so much change happening, we can see a lot of companies that, by protecting their castle, got swept by. I could go through, for example, Blockbuster, which we all know. Their competitive advantage was all around their physical footprint, right? And we all know how, unfortunately, that story didn't end so well as technology and companies like Netflix came and basically won that one. And it goes on and on. I mean, think about what's going on today in the hotel industry. I mean, who would have thought Airbnb, these business models are coming out of nowhere and disrupting all of our industries. And so, as a result, a lot of academics have started to challenge some of Porter's key concepts. And one of those academics is Professor McGrath from Columbia, who wrote a really great book called The End of Competitive Advantage. And basically, she addressed these fast times, and she writes, to win in volatile and uncertain environments, executives need to learn how to exploit short-lived opportunities with speed and decisiveness. So the key words here are volatile world. I think we all experience that today. And yet, how do you move with speed and decisiveness? And this is the new model, and these are the companies that are going to win. And so she basically changed it from sustainable competitive advantage to a new term, which she calls transient competitive advantage. There's these windows that open, and how do you take advantage of those transient moments? And I think the thing that's really interesting here is you got to be nimble and fast. And here you can see this motorcycle came out of the pack ahead of these bikes, which represents technology and speed and agility. The key thing I want to explain, though, about transient is it doesn't mean these are fads that come and go. You jump on them and they leave. This is about transient in terms of the window when you're doing it and your competitors don't. There's only a certain window. In many cases, it's 5 to 10 years. And then once everyone's doing it, that doesn't mean you don't have to do it. It just means when you do it, there's no advantage left. And so this is a really important concept. How do you take those moments when they come? And as we're thinking about social selling, how can we look for a blueprint or a roadmap to see where are we in this evolution in our cycle? And so I turn to our third book here, which is from Jeffrey Moore. And it's basically Crossing the Chasm. How many of you have read this book, Crossing the Chasm? Okay, about a third of you. I'll deconstruct it here for you in a sec. By the way, 3 books. So you guys you're saving you don't need to go to business school. You get your MBA right here at Sales Connect. So I'll break it down for you. But this is a seminal work in marketing. And he really breaks down these technology evolution into these stages. And so on the far left, you see innovators and early adopters. These are the few percentage point folks and companies who, before things are proven and completely vetted, they see the future and they're going to go for it. And they're going to be the trailblazers. And then typically what happens, particularly in the B2B world, once these trailblazers have shown it works, there's case studies, those players have built it out, but it's still not fully out mainstream. You get the next wave who they want to move fast, but they don't want to be first, and that's our early majority. And then after that, you come up with late majority who are a bit more conservative and are going to wait till most of their competitors are starting to do this. And then you got your laggards, who are still defending their castle, but everyone's gone. And so I think these 4 stages can help us map where we are in our social selling journey. And what's important about each of these stages, though, if you look left to right, you see on the far left, high risk. It's unproven. We don't know. Is it going to be a fad and it's going to be gone? Or is it going to be something everlasting that's with us in business today? And on the far right's no risk. So some of us may look at this slide and go, well, I'll just be a laggard. There's no risk. The problem, of course, is if you look at who's going to bake out on this, that window, this transient window of opportunity compared to your competitors, that window is shrinking. So you have the biggest reward, obviously, if you get it right in the innovators, early adopters bucket. And over by the far right laggards, you got, looks like 2 peanuts, okay? So you don't really get anything. I mean, you have to do it. It's like email today. If you haven't done email in your company, you're going to have to do it. You don't get any advantage. Same with increasingly CRM, other technologies. They become a part of our systems. ERP, you name it. You have to do these in companies. And so what I think is interesting about these stages is that the far left, if you think about it on expected value basis, yeah, if you get it right, the early adopters on the far left and innovators, I mean, they get the most gold bars here. But what's interesting is once you cross the chasm, a lot of the risk gone. So the early majority is a great spot to be. You don't get as much as the innovators, but there's still a lot of spoils. before the rest of the industry and the rest of your competitors catch on. And so how do we take advantage of this phase? And so what I wanted to do is first provide some historical context to a couple other trends most of us have experienced. How did they go through this curve? And then we're going to talk about social selling. So let's start with the topic of the web in the 90s. Now, many of us are going to kind of nod our heads and go, this stuff is so obvious. We're going to kind of smile and laugh about it. But let's go back in time. So I started my career in the mid-90s. 95, I started an internet company. I'd lived in Latin America, and I built a company that provided hard-to-get financial, economic, macroeconomic information. We distributed on the web. This is very innovative in 95, 96. And believe it or not, you can't make this stuff up. Guess what my biggest objection was back then? Well, I don't know if I want my employees on the web. They may screw around and be looking at sports stuff all day long. Or, I just don't want them distracted. And instead, many of them are like, I'm fine getting the daily faxes from Brazil and getting financial statements mailed to me up from Colombia. Believe it or not, that stuff was part of the world. And so if you think about that, and actually some of us maybe were in the room in the 90s, we didn't maybe jump right on it, and others of us saw it and acted on it. And if you think, for example, about like just building a website, we take it for granted today. But there were people who invested and built websites, in the early 94, 95, 96. Others kind of put up, just a little basic, couple pages of who they are. They didn't really invest in it. And they lost a window. And so let's talk about someone who moved early and how they gained the benefit as a result. So let's talk about Charles Schwab. We've got a few Charles Schwab people in the audience. Let's hear it up for Charles Schwab folks in the audience. There we are, a couple hands. So the story with Schwab was in 1994. They decided that they needed to go in on the web, and they really invested in it. It wasn't just a little side thing. They put someone took some risks, and they built their website. And this is also based on this notion of they had that DNA of moving quickly and understanding technology, as what Professor McGrath talked about, that concept of being a motorcycle, you got to move quick. And partly why they were able to go so fast and jump in full steam with the web was because they had success, because they took an intelligent risk with telebrokers in the late 80s, early 90s, literally calling up and getting a stock quote and making a trade. That was innovative, very innovative, and that was a big bet that Schwab made. It paid off. That gave them more confidence to lean in harder and with the web. And as a result of their efforts of being in that far left early adopter phase, the results speak for themselves. In 1995, they had 182 billion assets under management, and then investable assets. And just 2 years later, in 2006, 437 billion. That's a massive. Now, part of it's there was a bull run going on, so that's part of it. But the other thing was they were gaining share. And within 2 years, they became the number one broker in the North America. Amazing story. And also part of this story I think is interesting too, is they then invested and did Palm Pilot applications. That didn't work out so well. But the point is, if you're going to play in this fast-moving game, you also have to accept failures, because that's part of doing it. You can't always pick perfectly. And so either you're going to jump in and make bets along the way, or you're going to sit back and things will pass you by. So this is one example from the web. Let's talk about one a little closer to our heart, and is social recruiting, something that LinkedIn, we actually personally, as a company, were able to help transform. And so let's talk about social recruiting. So as you can see here are the rough years of social recruiting. Today, talk to your colleagues who are recruiters. Ask them, is it inevitable today? Can they do their jobs without LinkedIn? I guarantee you, just about every one of you, your recruiters are using LinkedIn and increasingly using LinkedIn Recruiter. It's just a competitive advantage. It's a weapon. And now, however, we're in the late majority. Most of us have that. But go back, unwind the clock 4 or 5 years ago at Talent Connect. It was in Vegas. I was here. I was fortunate to speak to an audience just like you, 2011, when there were folks just like you in the early adopter phase who had just crossed the chasm. And they were at this moment where we're at now. How do we maximize? How do we take advantage of this? Because they knew the window was going to close. And so wanted to share with you a story of one of those folks who took advantage, competitive advantage for their company. And that individual is Jennifer Candy from SAB Miller. And she just saw it. She saw, wow, this data in social, it's just going to change everything. And it's going to be a window. It's going to be a transient window where I can capture value for my company before everyone's doing it. And she moves swiftly and boldly. And you can see here, in her case, the big disruption was, and this is also someone in Europe, that they did a lot of their recruiting through third-party staffing, and she recognized, wow, we can do a lot of this through direct sourcing ourselves now that all this information is available. And it was a fundamentally different business model. And so she had to get support. So how did she do that? Well, she tried to get executive alignment, and it wasn't easy at first. She went through several meetings, and it didn't click. So she ended up sitting down one-on-one with some of the executives at this company, at Miller, and literally pulled out a laptop and just with some of the C-suite, just walked through, who are you looking for, talent, did the searches right there, showed them, lots of aha moments. Then they asked the executives, and can you contact them and reach out to them here? She showed them how, and then they were sold pretty quickly. And then when the next set of executives who had resistance came through, she was able to easily point them to their colleagues, and she helped really get this engine going. And as a result, she took this bet, it was a big bet, and she helped save her company a lot of money. And here you can see some of the results that she had in doing this. And what else is exciting, when people stick their neck out and for these big trends and it works out, good things happen to them. And so in her case, she's now recognized as one of the top recruiters in the world. She's been recognized by industry publications a couple times, one of the top 10 recruiters in the world. She's a frequent industry speaker, and her career has soared at SAB Miller. So this is a great moment to segue into us, because at LinkedIn we saw this transformation happen, and I asked, how is what happened in social recruiting, any different with social selling? And so where are we on our curve? So here we are as an industry, our profession, sales. This is us right here. We just crossed the chasm. How do we know that? Well, we're LinkedIn, so we can measure that. So let me walk you through how we can measure that. So here you have the social selling index, which is comprised of 4 key things, which is how we come up with this score. I'm going to briefly touch on each of the 4. So the first is around creating a professional brand. So this is around, in today's world where buyers are increasingly looking you up. 75% of B2B buyers are going online and going to social, specifically social, that are informed about the products and services they're considering. It's imperative that your company and your individuals, your army of salespeople, are representing themselves in the best light, okay? This is really, really important. The second piece is around finding the right people. So today there's far more people involved in the decision-making process. There's now CEB talks about there's over 5 people in a decision-making process. There's IT committees. That's not new to sales. But what is new is there's more people involved and there's more consensus buying than ever before. And as a result, it's critical that our sales team increasingly maps out an organization and finds and maps out the key influencers in their sale. And unfortunately, many of us in the room, we have the data. Your reps aren't doing that. They're doing sometimes what we call single threading. They've got one relationship, they're hanging on for it with dear life, and that's a dangerous place to be. And so this is really important. How do you map out and find more people and build out that influence map? The third piece, engaging with insights. This is the one piece that we actually will break up into 2. There's about publishing or sharing, and then there's about receiving or obtaining insights. So let's talk about obtaining and receiving insights. These are basically triggers, alerts, news. This is gold to a salesperson. If I know when someone's been promoted in my account, if I know someone's left the company, if I know someone has joined the company, these are incredibly important signals. If I see that some of the key people I want to sell into have influence, have spoken at an event, have recently published something, they're mentioned in the news, these are valuable. Or the company has grown and is opening up a new plant somewhere. This is really, really important signals. And so this is half of what we mean by insights. The other half is around sharing or publishing. And this isn't necessarily writing new content. This is about curating, liking, sharing content. And that's important because This scales. You know, we were at a round table last night with financial services companies, and they have a lot of financial advisors, insurance brokers, et cetera. That doesn't mean we're going to replace face-to-face. That's more important than ever. But coffee doesn't scale. How many coffees can you have in a year? And so this is a way to stay up to date, to stay relevant with your key customers. The fourth piece is around building relationships. And this should be pretty obvious to all of us. Everyone understands in sales, and particularly in B2B, we're more about relationships and transactions. But what we don't do is that we still are relying on outdated ways of cold calling, email, and blasting. Many of us in this room still are believing, you know, cold calling is not working, but you know what? I have my reps cold call 100 people a day. It's not working as well. Let's jack it up to 125. Let's just keep jacking it up. Well, the problem with that is it's not effective and it damages your brand. Close to 50% of people who receive cold outreach like that look less favorably on your brand. So when you're bombing them and your reps are bombing them in a year or two, there's consequences. You know, over 90% of cold outreach goes unanswered. And so a better way forward is through warm introductions. We should all know that. It's very obvious. But how do we do that at scale? This is a whole new world because now we have data where we can map all these relationships and actually do it scientifically. And we're all at different stages of that journey here. You know, a lot of your reps don't even know how to ask for an intro. Some of them don't know how to use Team Link properly, which is a feature inside of Sales Navigator that helps you mine your company's network. How do you respond? And how do you do it scientifically? And this is the opportunity. So these are the key 4 buckets of social selling. One thing I do want to call out is there's a lot of marketing folks in the room. And so marketing obviously can have a huge hand in the first one, creating a professional brand. I want to say that's probably the easiest one because you can get 80% of the way there in probably about an hour and a half or 2 hours. So that's a fairly easy one to knock out. The other one that marketing can help, but is arguably the hardest, is the part about sharing content. There's lots of questions, and some of the folks I talked to yesterday, how do you share content? You know, that's a brave new world, particularly in regulated industries. And what I want to tell you is that's important, but it's difficult. And actually, LinkedIn has recently launched a product called Elevate, which you're going to hear more about later, that makes it dead simple for your employees to share the content that you've already curated. So it's important, but it's difficult. And remember, sharing content is just half of bucket 3. Okay, because a lot of marketers think, oh, social selling is about sharing content. It's part of the equation, but it's actually only 12.5%. And we know this because we've correlated SSI to win rates. And so these are a portion in what we see matters. So my encouragement here is let's start with the low-hanging fruit and work our way up to some of the more complicated pieces. So this is SSI, and then for every individual in the world, we can measure it from 0 to 100. And you can see there that motorcycle guy moving forward as a leader. And now we've been talking a lot about companies, how we move through competitive advantage. But what about individuals? And, you know, there's a great book. I'm going to introduce another book here. Jill Conrath wrote a great book called Agile Selling. And she talks about the best reps today. They're just nimble and fast, just like us as companies. You know, why would you not want to get an edge? Why would we ever stay calcified in what we normally do? Why not always be open to new technology and new ways of doing things? And so a lot of our reps, even without us leading as sales and marketing leaders, we all have pockets who've been grabbing on and have been doing this for a while. And so we have a score for 0 to 100 for each individual, which then we can roll up by company, by region, et cetera. And then we rolled it up globally, and on average, we're at 12.2 here, you see 2012. And we've made a big jump to 28.2 here in just a few years. And for those of you who want more information on SSI, my colleague Lauren Mullenholtz is going to be up here at 11:15, just a few hours. And she's going to have a whole session here, and Microsoft's going to join her to talk about SSI specifically. And we have far more materials in our in-lounge here. We have our insights team that can walk you through all your questions about SSI. And we also have some interesting news we're going to announce later about SSI and the product. So since we're LinkedIn, we can measure it. Here we are mapped to where it looks on the chasm. So this is how I believe we're here, and we are now in the early majority phase. So if we in the room are in the early majority phase, where do we take our inspiration and our guidance to how do we move forward? How did the people in the innovators and early adopters bucket do it? So we're going to turn to some how we're going to seize that? We're going to seize that opportunity through 3 ways, and we're going to tell these 3 ways through 3 social selling heroes that best represent each of these 3. So in regards to the first, executive alignment, I want to talk about Mark DeFakis. Is Mark in the audience here? Mark from PTC? Hey, Mark. Thank you for joining us. I had the privilege of speaking with Mark and getting his story recently, and it's a fascinating story. So first of all, PTC is a technology solutions company that helps companies manage, service, and create products, and they're a big player in the product lifecycle space. And what's interesting is their world is moving very quickly, and they're moving to a world of IoT, Internet of Things. And here you can see Mark's quote about speed is king. We need to deploy social selling now. We can't wait. And I asked him specifically, like, why are you moving so quickly without, preponderance of data and case studies specifically in your own firm? He said, we just can't wait. And what he shared with me, which was fascinating, because I told him a little about what I was going to talk about, he said, that reminds me of a book, that we read and that we believe in, which is, it's no longer about the big eating the small, it's about the fast eating the slow, which is, of course, another analogy of this theme of what I've been talking about. And so in a world of IoT, they have new customers. It's a whole new world. So how do they move fast before this world continues to go, and this transient advantage in several years is gone? And so how did he do that? So the first thing Mark did a great job. This is why it's a great example of executive alignment. So here you can see their corporate strategy is around getting competitive differentiation through smart, connected products. And this may seem pretty obvious, but it was brilliant, is that Mark just connected to, we're smart, connected reps, social selling, smart, connected reps. How can we be doing smart, connected products if our reps aren't smart, connected reps? But this clicked. It was translated into their executive language. And so very quickly, nods were heading. So then what? So then Mark had to go to senior leadership. And how did he get them on board and aligned? Well, again, translation and personalizing the message. He rallied their global sales leader, Bob Rinaldi, and others. And the number one metric they're trying to move is around sales rep productivity, right? If you can move that a little bit, it's massive. And so how do you get the folks who are in the middle of the pack, slightly below, to come and rise up and be top performers? And so that was a really important message. And so a lot of the social selling angle that they came through is, here's how we're going to do that. Here's specifically how we're going to increase rep productivity. And then meanwhile, as we're doing executive alignment, Mark rallied one of his leaders on his team, a gentleman named Julian out of the UK, to actually build a program. So what's the program we're going to roll out so we can execute on this? And so they spent about 1/3 of the time on executive alignment and 2/3 of the time on building out how they're going to do this and roll it out. And the results so far have been nothing short of spectacular. Here you can see just an incredible ROI. And it's just, this is what happens because now Mark and his team, they're smart, connected reps, and they're going after all these new accounts. The world's changing with IoT, and they're now being armed, and they're out there every day. And they're already seeing some incredible results. So wonderful story. Thank you, Mark, for sharing that with us. And it's just a wonderful one. So I briefly alluded to Mark and his team build programs. And that takes us to our next story of a social selling hero. And here we have Phil Lurie, a senior leader in their sales tools and technology at SAP, one of the world's largest software companies. And you can see Phil's quote. I mean, he saw social selling as inevitable. Social selling is the biggest single change to the SAP sales strategy in the last 10 years by an order of magnitude, equating it to as big, if not bigger, than the CRM wave we've last seen in the last decade. And Phil was bold. They acted very bold at SAP. They were rolling out Sales Navigator to every single sales rep in their company because they believe, in this case, that their collective network at SAP is a competitive advantage, and that by mining that through things like TeamLink and Sales Navigator, they will have an edge. Because when they go into an RFP or a process, they can find who in their company has the best relationships. And so how did he do this? I mean, that's a pretty big bet for a company that size and to go that big. And so here you can see I was either going to be a hero or a villain. Someone has to take a risk to make things happen. So how did Phil make this happen. So he shared with me 3 key things around this how to educate and get adoption and build it up. So the first, again, these are pretty common sense, but these are still great tips because sometimes we lose sight of some of these key principles. So one is customize the training. So again, may sound obvious, but what they did is they spent a lot of time saying, you know what, I'm not going to just roll out social selling training to the entire sales team. I recognize inside sales reps are going to need different things than a field sales rep. And so, for example, an inside sales rep, you may be looking for to find more leads, more companies, and so spending a lot more time with the training and sales navigator around things like lead recommendations, lead builder, how to use search more effectively. Whereas for the enterprise field team, who may only have a couple accounts and they're trying to get deeper in their accounts, it's less about finding new companies, and there it's more around how do I get alerts and triggers? How do I react to those? How do I stay informed so that I understand what's going on through the rest of the company? And so really building out materials that are very specific to each end user, each type of rep, okay? The second thing is he bundled it inside their overall sales training. And again, this may seem obvious, but some of us have these bolt-on, social selling things on the side. We have to spend time, particularly in enterprise, where we have hundreds, if not thousands, we've got to scale. We have to work with our sales training and enablement teams. And that's exactly what Phil did. So Phil, believer, he actually, with our help and guidance, we gave him materials and coaching, advice, et cetera. And then Phil was able to essentially train the trainers, in this case, the instructors. And he got them really excited. And he worked with them to translate it into their overall materials. So it became part of their sales process, not this bolt-on. That was a really important move. And then finally, don't lose sight of managers. No matter how good you're spending all this time getting reps in their new hire training and spreading what makes sense, if you don't get the managers on board, a lot of that doesn't get propagated. And so they built a lot of time and attention to really getting their managers signed up on this and believing that this is the way forward. And again, similar to our PTC story, we've seen incredible, massive results already. One of the ways they can track ROIs, they're doing certain things in the CRM where they're tracking opportunities back to things like Sales Navigator. They're also soliciting success stories. So SAP now has over 100 success stories, with most of them with dollar amounts, with deal details that then get sent and submitted throughout as a way to encourage the team. And I was talking to Phil, we could have picked 1 out of 100. We decided to share this one because it just happened recently. There's a cool story. Some of the reps were saying, Asia, this is in Asia Pacific. Asia's not really ready for social selling. It's more of a North America, EMEA phenomenon. By the way, we have the data. We have SSI. That's not the case. But anyway, so they shared and trained some skeptical sales reps at SAP. And lo and behold, after some optimizing their profile and some other things, a few days later, you can't make this stuff up, a customer, because buyers are looking and doing research, was looking for a solution that SAP offered and literally reached out to this rep who showed up high in search results and had an outstanding profile. And the rest you can see here is a $500,000 deal. There's lots more of these stories, which are great. So I think, the verdict's yet out, but it looks like Phil is more on his way to being a hero at SAP. So our last hero is around this notion we're talking about measuring. Let's talk about measuring. And I think Fernanda Gorgel at Symantec from EMEA is a great place to start. Similar to SAP in measuring and getting adoption and engagement is this notion of success stories. This is really important. And so they solicit these stories and then they share them in their newsletters and they show these wins. It's a big deal. And it also helps them get more and more confident with their ROI. But what else has happened is SSI essentially is the core of what they do. The way they've measured everything is around SSI. And before that, they had no idea what their team was doing on LinkedIn. They couldn't really coach them, let alone even know what they were doing, other than look at profiles. And remember, I showed you the 4 components of Social Selling Index. Maybe you could get a feel of their profile, but what about the other 3? You have no idea. And so SSI armed her and her team to be able to really get in there. And what they did is a couple tips. Is they break down SSI, 1, and 2, they make it actionable. So let me explain. So instead of just giving scores to individuals, they're actually breaking into the 4 pieces and even more granular. And this is now, we're increasingly providing more and more of this in Sales Navigator in our usage reporting. And you're going to hear more about that later today when Jeff Berkland, head of our product team, is going to share some of the advancements. But basically, we can get down to a granular level, and that's really important because now we can coach a rep and say, you're really low on finding the right people. This is really important. Let me explain how you do it. This is what we're going to work on. Whereas someone else may be weak on building the right relationship. And so they need training on how do you actually send out an intro email? How and when do you connect with your customers? And so that's been really, really valuable because, again, by getting that granular, it's allowed her and her team to be more actionable. The other innovative thing that they're doing that I'd share is the notion of benchmarking. And so the benchmarking reps against themselves, teams against teams, and then Symantec against their competitors. So in regards to reps, they send out, I can't remember if it's weekly or monthly newsletters with SSI leaderboards. And for those of you in sales and marketing, it's a huge motivator. We in sales love leaderboards. I always laugh about it because at my all hands, I started out my all hands a few years ago at a couple leaderboards, and I always get feedback after. Well, what about this, this, and this? People are really excited and proud of the work they did. So it's it's almost like a third of my all hands now are just leaderboard after leaderboard. Reps love it because we want to be recognized when we're doing something great, and we love that competitive juice. And so they've really gamified it through that. And they not only gamified it with reps, they also gamified it with their different teams. So they were looking at which teams were doing great and not. And also at that granular level, because one team may be doing great with, say, engaging with insights, another great with profiles, and how can they leverage that learning so that each team can help each other? And then finally, they compared to their competitors. And these are where the results, they're really proud with Symantec. Sales Navigator Symantec users are now almost 50% higher SSI than their competitors. And so this is working out extremely well for Symantec. So I want to thank these 3 individuals because they are leading the way. They're showing what's possible. And it's not just them I want to thank, many of you in the room. Some of you are going to be up here today at panels, and you've been doing this now for a year, 2 years, some even 3 years. And you are the early adopters. And you are the ones that essentially have helped all of us in this room cross the chasm because of the great work you've done. And so now we are now entering in, as I mentioned earlier, we're in that spot here, the early majority. So what are we going to do about it? How are we going to take advantage? How are you going to take advantage of this moment in time? So we decided to ask you. So last night we filmed some of you in a video.
Look around you, the world is changing fast, and for us the aha moment was, why are we continuing to cold call? Why are we trying to sell to buyers in a way they don't want to buy?
If you're not in it, I don't know where you've been, what planet you've been on, but this is the place to be, and I'm so glad to be here. Sales Navigator has been a great tool for us, and we're excited to take it to the next level.
It worked for us. I can mention cases where, I approached clients through LinkedIn, and we have signed contracts and they're happy with us today.
I think, the telephone and the cold calling and all is just passé. I think it's last century.
One of our sales reps actually closed a 100K plus deal through LinkedIn Sales Navigator in Q2. So that was kind of our first 6-figure deal.
This is the right way to do things today, and I think it's just going to explode from here.
It's all about reaching out and being intelligent about the buyer. So you can't live without it in today's selling world.
Nobody's cold calling, that's dead. And you've got low-hanging fruit on there, people you know that you can ask for introductions. So what else would you be doing?
Is there anybody who doesn't believe in social? I just think that nowadays, if you want to be relevant, you need to use it.
If you don't believe in it, well, this is what I have to say. Adapt, adopt, or die, because it's the future.
All right, let's give it up for the folks on the video there. Excellent. So to bring us home, as we're now here in this early adopter phase, I wanted to just lock in on our themes right around connect, inspire, transform. So hopefully Jonathan got us started with Connect with this conference, and we're in that process. Inspire, hopefully I've inspired you to see where we are in our journey and what's possible for those who make it happen. And then transform. This isn't easy. We recognize that most of us here are believers, but we have to make it happen in our organization. And we at LinkedIn and my team, we understand it's far more than software. This is a process, and we're in it with you. And we want to help you in your efforts to transform and to take competitive advantage. Thank you.